Pilot error, system failure, or neglect on the part of the Coast Guard to help guide a 900-foot freighter out of the San Francisco Bay. Those are the questions from the National Transportation Safety Board holding hearings on the November 7th Cosco Busan accident that spilled 58,000 gallons of heavy bunker oil, soiling beaches and killing more than 2,000 birds.
We bring them out. We're going to look at everything. We're going to look at the pilot that is responsible for getting the ship through those areas. We're going to look at the crew and everyone. We look at if there was, we know there was alcohol involved, but we haven't gotten the drug tests back yet, so we will look at that. All of the things we will look at, because we always want to improve. If the performance was a 9, next time it ought to be a 10.
We're going to look at all elements of this accident, which will also include this pilot.
That pilot, John Coda, elected to steer toward the Bay Bridge even though there was confusion about whether the ship's navigation equipment worked. In newly released audio transcripts, Chinese crew members expressed concern as well about the heavy fog. And the Coast Guard's Vessel Traffic Service questioned Coda's course, but never gave an explicit warning a crash was imminent. The NTSB chairman also grilled the Coast Guard about an allegation made by Coda's attorney that Coast Guard personnel were placing bets on whether the Cosco Busan would hit the bridge.
This did not happen. That's correct?
And I can tell you that absolutely that did not take place.
The NTSB is also looking at whether the response to such a major spill was adequate. According to the transcripts, Coda knew the ship was leaking large quantities of oil when a relief pilot boarded and told him just 33 minutes after the crash, quote, "When I came up, the stuff was coming out like a cow peeing on a flat rock." Coda responded, "Yeah, I just noticed that when we anchored." Still, the size of the spill was first reported as just 146 gallons. Rob Dudgeon is the public safety manager for San Francisco.
We didn't find out about the thousands of gallons until about 9 o'clock that night.
57,000 gallons of bunker fuel oil leaked for half an hour after the container ship Cosco Busan hit the buffer that protects the base of Bay Bridge towers.
Restricted visibility, which is what was today with the heavy fog. Mariners are advised to go at what's called bare steerage way, which is very slow.
Captain Pat Maloney heads the state commission to oversee Bay Area pilots. His investigation will focus strictly on whether or not there was pilot error. He says the Cosco Busan's route from the port of Oakland is typically an easy one.
Coming from Oakland, you'd be in an easy right-hand turn, and so you're not steady on a course. There's plenty of room in there. No, it's not a tricky turn.
Throughout the day, people we've talked to say this kind of accident is not supposed to happen. It's rare, especially given the experience of the local pilot on board the ship.
We handle over 10,000 ship movements a year, and our safety record is 99.97+%.
Crown 4's Jonathan Bloom is live with tonight's top story at 5. Jonathan.
And Pam, we're here at Fort Mason. We're just on the other side of the camera. There is a bustling incident command post set up to begin investigating how this happened. Things are in their infancy right now. Members of the Coast Guard are just beginning to take a look at all the things that could have contributed to this crash. Well, we've already found out about one mistake, and here's the irony. That mistake could have been made by investigators themselves. With sheets of fuel oil spreading out across the bay, Coast Guard authorities say they immediately started investigating the ship that hit the Bay Bridge. But listen closely to what they did.
We interviewed everybody on the crew. We drug and alcohol tested everyone in the crew. We interviewed the pilot. The pilot had to come to our office at 10 o'clock this morning on Coast Guard Island, and we interviewed him and did drug and alcohol tests on him as well.
Did you hear that? Everyone else was tested immediately, but the man who was actually steering the ship was drug and alcohol tested a full day after the crash.
He was tested this morning for both alcohol and drugs.
How many hours after the incident was that?
That would be 24?
Yeah,
20.
10. About 26.
26 hours.
How did that happen?
The pilot, after the collision happened, the pilot got off the boat right away. So when our crew went on board the ship, the pilot that happened during his watch where the accident was not there.
Captain, you're going to give no explanation for why you waited 26 hours?
We're done addressing the pilot question right now. Thank you very much. We're done addressing the pilot question right now. Thank you. Any other questions?
And then 1 minute later.
Thank you, Barry. I'm sorry I have to cut the press conference short right now. These folks need to get back inside. Thank you all for your time.
How many agencies?
I'm sorry we have to stop right now.
Now, the concern, of course, is that while most drugs stay in the system for days or even weeks, alcohol can leave the body in a matter of hours, which means the longer they waited, the less that test will tell us about whether the pilot was sober at the time of the crash. Now, accuracy aside, the results from all of those drug and alcohol tests won't be back for a few days. Live in San Francisco, Jonathan Bloom, Cron 4 News. Now, we've just found out why the Coast Guard says that they cut the press conference short. We're trying to see if we have the videotape for you now. If not, we'll tell you exactly what happened. And here's what happened. Basically, they said that during the press conference, they received information that when the pilot left the ship, he was actually going to a Coast Guard boat to be drug and alcohol tested, so that in fact the pilot was drug and alcohol tested within the hour that the crash occurred. They say that this miscommunication happened as a result of the complex command structure that they have here at the incident command post, and that in fact the pilot was not tested this morning. He was just interviewed this morning. And what happened yesterday was that everybody on the boat, on the ship rather, including the pilot, was drug and alcohol tested, and so far all of them have tested negative for alcohol. The drug tests will be coming in just a few days.
Yeah, there's not even an estimate right now, Barbara, for how long this cleanup could take, and I've been talking with several of the experts here who've been handling this spill, and they told me this morning that it is a catastrophe. We have reports of oil already as far north as Dillon Beach near Tamales Bay and as far south as Ocean Beach. We have been watching some of the cleanup vessels out on the bay today, but we're being told the spill could impact bay life for years to come.
We're dealing with the number one problem, which is the floating oil that continues to move around the bay.
There are 200 people working on the investigation and cleanup. Most are driving boats, cleaning shoreline, flying helicopters, and looking for oiled wildlife. 18,000 feet of oil containment boom is being used. There are 5 absorbing boats in the bay. 3 are outside of the Golden Gate. The full extent of the spill is still unknown.
We have, again, multiple helicopters up now taking comprehensive observations to try to map that and get us a best. That's going to expand and contract based on conditions, but that will give us hopefully the most up-to-date response area.
But there are questions about the response and about why hours after the accident the Coast Guard reported only 140 gallons of oil had spilled. The agency says it got the first reports from the ship's crew.
Just because we got that initial estimate, that didn't stop us from deploying all these resources right away.
The Coast Guard says quick action allowed them to get booms and skimmer vessels in the water and absorb 8,000 gallons of the oil.
Well, I can tell you, just to recover that much oil on the same day that it happened, that's very fast. But 58,000 gallons is a lot of oil, so we acted as fast as is humanly possible to do that. So it's just a lot, and some of the oil's got to hit, and we can't stop everything, but we're going to do our best.
San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom promised legal action yesterday against whoever's responsible for the spill. He also questioned why the public didn't find out about how big it was until more than 12 hours later. It's something the Coast Guard addressed.
It wasn't reported until later that evening. That is unacceptable.
We would have assessed on a 58,000 gallon spill the need to do a lot more, a lot quicker.
Investigators are now looking into what they call bridge management issues as a possible cause for the accident.
They have to do with communications between the officer on watch and the helmsman, that type of stuff and procedure. So we looked closely into that, and it looks like we might have some problems there.
Investigators are waiting for an audit of the ship's communication system.
There's confusion. Later on in the day when we revised the oil spill estimate on the discharge, that was not passed in a timely manner. I don't want to confuse the inability to pass that information on with the fact that the response was mounted properly.
Okay, so what you're saying, because obviously what you're talking about here is what was first released, and that was, to the press anyway, about 140 gallons of oil that apparently leaked, and then later finding out that it's closer to 58,000 gallons, a huge disparity. So you're saying people there on the ground knew that the oil spill was much more severe, and that information just did not get out in a timely manner?
Well, what happened was the event occurred early in the morning when there was a lot of fog, poor visibility. We couldn't get a helicopter up to do an accurate assessment. We had to move the vessel to an anchorage. We weren't able to sound the tanks because of the damage to the tanks. It took till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon to ascertain the exact amount that had been released. In the meantime, there was a eyeball estimate made that was 140 gallons. That probably shouldn't even have been released because it's very, very difficult to assess how much oil has been spilled once it's on the water. But that did not slow the response. We had skimming equipment and booms out there right away.